you for being here on a momentous night. Many of us are depressed and upset about what's going on television. It's hard to watch, but it's reality, and hopefully it'll end up differently than it's starting. And I want to introduce your leader, my friend, Marilyn Katz.
So it's great to be here with all these leaders. Everyone in this room, I know mostly personally, is a leader, which is why we come together at events like this, at forums, et cetera, to keep moving forward and to build a movement that we know eventually will topple Trump. So tonight is really special. We didn't know how special it was going to be. When we asked our co-sponsors, the Girlfriends Group, Rainbow Push, Indivisible, Health and Medicine, and Women's March to join us in sponsoring this, we knew that Jill, who had spoken to us before, would be important. We knew that her comments on impeachment, on illegality, having been through Nixon, having watched the pathetic attempt to impeach Clinton, would really come to bear and enlighten us on this current struggle. But who would have thought that this would happen on the opening day of the Senate trial? So timing is everything, and the fates may be with us. I'm going to get out of your way. I'm going to introduce you to really the leader of Chicago Women Take Action, the new leader, Jackie Grimshaw, who has been really with us from the beginning. And Jackie is going to take over, and we're going to hear from Jill, have a conversation between Jackie and Jill, and then open it up to all of you. And after we've heard the critical news, the analysis, then Jackie and our partners will talk about where we, as leaders, all go and what we do next. So thank you for coming. We are all sisters in the struggle, and some very enlightened men, so thank you. And well, let's give a hand to welcome Jackie and Jill.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Man, Marilyn cannot understate or overstate, the serendipitous arrangement that we had. Who knew when we started talking to Jill in October that we picked the exact right date, right? I mean, we're brilliant women. Now, that's the only thing I can say, to be able to do that. Yeah, I'll take a clap for that, for sure. So I know Jill really needs no introduction, but, I got to be a little bit formal here and describe Jill in terms of where she is now and where she's been. So right now, Jill is MSNBC legal analyst. She began her career as the first female organized crime prosecutor in the U.S. Department of Justice. Well, yay, that's what I say too, which led to her selection as one of the 3 assistant special prosecutors in the case against President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon's top aides for obstruction of justice and the Watergate scandal. I shouldn't be doing this without my glasses, so if I stumble a bit, it's bad eyes. She has also served as the General Counsel of the U.S. Army, partner at Jenner & Block, first Solicitor General and first woman Deputy Attorney General of the state of Illinois, and the first female Chief Operating Officer of the American Bar Association. President Preckman, that sound like you, a lot of firsts going on here with, yeah, okay. She's a graduate of the University of Illinois and Columbia Law School. She lives in Evanston and is the author of The Watergate Girl, a book that's coming out soon, so get ready to spend a little money, and is being published on February 25th, 2020. And she is a candidate to be a Biden delegate. And with that, Jill is all yours.
Think it is now. So Today may be the ideal day for some people. For me, this is like torment because I'm with you instead of watching the television. So what am I going to say tomorrow when I'm on air and I haven't watched it all? It means I'm going to be up till heaven only knows how late tonight because I don't know how late they're going to go. But this business of the rules, which I'm sure you're all aware of, where they're going to go till 2, 3 in the morning, is absurd for ever so many reasons. Number one, the Chief Justice only has cases today and tomorrow, which means they don't have to start at 1 o'clock. They could start at 9 in the morning. Secondly, they don't have to go for 12 hours in one day. In the Clinton case, they did not do that. They did have 24 hours, but they spread it out over 3 or 4 days. No one, not one single senator, not one single viewer can absorb 12 hours of testimony in 12 hours. You need it spread out over more time so you can take breaks and so you can really get the evidence. But it's even worse than that because there is no evidence. They aren't allowing evidence. You've probably seen that there have been 2 votes already, and the Republicans held, and there is no witnesses until maybe they'll think about it later under a very high standard, and there's no documents. So how do you make an opening statement? I don't know, how many of you are lawyers or have watched television law? Hopefully that's everybody here. So how do you make an opening statement? An opening statement says, you will hear in this trial testimony from Mr. A, who will say this, and then Mr. B will say, and you put together a narrative of what the evidence is. How do you say that when you don't know if you're going to be able to have Bolton? And by the way, even if you did, you don't know what he's going to say. So that's another problem, which is all of the witnesses that we would like to have now are all high-risk witnesses. I don't know what Bolton will say. I don't know what Mulvaney would say. No one can know that except them. And so it's a high risk to put them on the stand. Now, the rules now say that they have to be deposed first, but once they're deposed, if you don't put them on, it's going to look bad. What's the role of the judge in this? Chief Justice Roberts. Everybody is saying he doesn't have to be a potted plant, even though that's what Justice Rehnquist was. And Justice Rehnquist was proud of it. Remember, he said, I did very little and I did it very well. And it was true. He didn't. He just totally let it go. And it is true that under the Senate rules, they can overrule anything that he says. But I think as a political matter, if he started ruling that this witness is relevant and should testify, this witness, for example, Hunter Biden, is totally irrelevant to the crime of impeachment by the president, that eventually that looks really bad for them if they're insisting on overruling all of his rulings. I'm already disappointed because I think the first thing he should have done, when he swore in the Senate, instead of just administering the oath, he should have done what a judge would do, which is to poll the jury. You voir dire them, you find out who has an opinion, who's read the press, who's formed an opinion. That doesn't mean that you can't be a juror. It means you have to be asked, can you set aside that opinion? Will you judge on the evidence presented in front of you in this trial? And he didn't do that. He let them, even knowing that at least 2 of them have publicly announced they don't care what the evidence is, they're not paying any attention to it, they're going to work with the president to make sure he's acquitted. Those are people who shouldn't be allowed to render a judgment. They took an oath to render impartial justice. And you cannot do that when you have an opinion that you will not set aside. And that's what they said. They won't set it aside. So we're kind of in trouble because they have held and they're going to be able to sustain their plan of action. And that leaves the Democrats without being able to do everything they could. Now, having said that, there is a very strong case already. There was a strong enough case to bring an impeachment, to bring articles of impeachment. In the same way that if it was a criminal trial, if you have probable cause to believe that there's enough evidence, you can go ahead with an indictment. Then you continue to investigate. And I want to point out something that seems to have gotten lost, which is the smoking gun tape, which is the pivotal evidence that turned the evidence against against Nixon was something that was subpoenaed after indictment. It was our pre-trial subpoena. We subpoenaed 9 documents, 9 tapes before the indictment. We got 6.5 of them. One had 18-minute gap and 2 were missing. So out of the 9, we didn't get them all, but we did okay. But we knew we needed more and that there was more available. And we had now established a principle that there is a fraud crime exception, which apparently Donald Trump has forgotten, that there's an exception to immunity and that he would have to turn them over. So we then picked 64 more tapes. And it was one of those tapes that was the June 23rd tape in which President Nixon says, let's use the CIA to stop the FBI from investigating the chain of money. The chain of money was important because the $100 bills found on the burglars when they were arrested in the DNC came from a cashed campaign check. And it could have been traced back to the committee to re-elect the president. So that's why they didn't want the money followed, and that the phrase follow the money comes from that, because the FBI knew that by following the money that they could prove that it was the president, the White House, and the campaign committee that was responsible for the break-in. And so that takes us back to a crime that was called abuse of power. And now we're being feted with an argument by the 2020 version of Alan Dershowitz, who says that it isn't a crime. Now, he did think it was a crime in the old days, in 1998. He said that was a crime. And let me assure you that abuse of power is definitely an impeachable offense. There is absolutely no question. You may remember in the House they had 4 constitutional scholars. All 4 of them, including the Republican Turley, said it was a crime. Turley went on to say, but I don't think there's enough evidence of it having been committed here. Not that it's not a crime that would be grounds for impeachment, but that it hadn't been proven. Now, he said that, of course, before a lot of the evidence has come out. I mean, Parnas hadn't testified yet. The GAO hadn't said that he had committed a crime by withholding the money. It was a violation of the Impoundment Act. So even if he thought there wasn't enough evidence, which he was wrong then, he's even wronger now. And so there is a crime, which you don't need a crime. You don't need a crime because of a variety of things. Number one, when the Constitution was passed, we didn't have a federal criminal code. So they didn't have a crime of, for example, even treason or bribery, let alone a definition for what other high crimes and misdemeanors were. But if you read the Federalist Papers, or if you read the debates about the impeachment, you will see that it was very clear they did not intend to limit it to crimes under any statute. They intended it to be broad enough. They debated, for example, they said, you know, judges should be impeached because they have lifetime tenure. But for elected officials, they have a term of office. Maybe they don't need to be impeached because you can vote them out. And then they said, no, what if they did something really horrible that threatened our national security? If they did something that was against the Constitution, we have to be able to impeach them in that situation. And so that's why they added the terms. They thought about maladministration as the alternative to high crimes and misdemeanors and thought that was just too vague. And so they added the high crimes and misdemeanors, which actually, of course, is also quite vague. It doesn't really say what it is, but it means not an ordinary crime. It's not jaywalking. It's not speeding. And presidents have been ticketed for speeding in Washington, by the way, in the old days, on horseback. So it's possible, but I think it's really clear what was meant. And so we have a very clear case where the law is completely on the side of what has happened. Morality is clearly on the side. I have said from maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that impeachment was the right thing to do because it is the morally correct thing. And Billy last night was with my former boss, Attorney General Hartigan, and I always thought I was the right person to be the deputy and he was the right one to be the Attorney General because I could say what is right. I didn't have to make any of the political compromises. So it's easy for me to sit here and say impeachment was the right thing and forget about whatever political consequences it will have. And there is some evidence that it is hurting the Democrats, that it isn't helping, but it is the right thing to do. I don't think you can let President Trump do the things he has done and get away with them and set a stage for him to do it again. I mean, he's already done it. He started with Russia, then he went to Ukraine, then he said, oh, China, you do it too. And he did this, like the Ukraine thing, the day after the testimony of the Mueller investigation. I'm free at last, and, oh, bad timing on that phrase, sorry. But that is what he was thinking. I'm exonerated, and so now I can go and do something else bad. And I think he will show us that he will keep on doing bad things unless he's held accountable. Unfortunately, because he has no shame, that he is not ashamed that he has been impeached. And I don't think it's going to stop him. The only thing that can stop him is everyone in this room doing what you have to do, which is not just voting because Illinois is going to vote Democratic no matter what. But you have to get yourselves to Milwaukee. It's only an hour on the train. Go to Wisconsin, go to Michigan, go to the places that matter where you could maybe flip someone. Knock on doors. There is something very, very moving to me about engaging in democracy at that level of just knocking on doors. And I did this for Hillary, and I was told, oh, I don't like her, but I hate him. Okay, fine. If you hate him and you don't like her, that's less. Vote for her. You know, I mean, I had plenty of reasons why I thought we should vote for her, but okay, I'm willing to take your vote just to stop him from being president. But it really is going to come down to getting out the vote right now and making sure we register people and that we prevent, in certain states, that we prevent voter suppression, because it's going to take something really big to get rid of him. People still say, oh, the economy is good, so I don't care about all the rest of it. Well, I care about the rest of it. It's not enough. And besides, the economy isn't good. It's good for me. It's probably good for everybody in this room. But it's not good for the rest of the country. And that's not good. And the hatred that he has unveiled is something that is just very scary. And the fact that he has controlled the Republican Party, watching today, if anybody watched, I'm sure you were tearing your hair out. I mean, I almost wanted to cry thinking about all of the things that I was hearing, and that they're sitting there silent. And all the people, we thought Mitt Romney was going to be the one who was going to stand up. Oh, where is he? Voting with the Republicans. Where is Susan Collins? Voting with the they're all with him, and I don't know what his power is, and I don't know what Russia has on him, because they still, a lot of this still goes back to Russia. Why do you care about Ukraine? Because they're fighting Russia, and he wants to protect Russia. It's all horrible. So I know you have lots of good questions, and Jackie probably has lots of good questions. So I think we should just move to that phase, and then I'll stick around to answer questions as much as I can.
You're going to stay up? You're going to... And then when the questions are out, I'll take the mic and I'll run out.
Okay, okay. We can share one.
No, we have two
I'll
mics.
take it later.
Oh, okay.
What's
Can you see us if we sit down?
Well, let's see what happens. You can see us. Awesome. So thank you, Jill. That was wonderful. You know, for me, the reason to have you here is just to get kind of like a perspective. You know, you've been through it. You know, this is our third one. You know. So, you know, we don't have a lot of experience, but the little experience we do have, you're probably, of all of us, the one who has the most learned interpretation of what's going on. So let me start with the fact that we have 2 articles of impeachment. I think your opinion was that 2 was all we needed. And so why is that? Why did you think that?
Well, I would have actually liked more, and I actually would even consider having the House do more now. You have the GAO, which could be its own article of impeachment. Lev Parnas probably has said something that could be another article of impeachment. But I do think what's important, and there were 3 in Watergate. And by the way, lying to the public was one of the things we included in our roadmap when we turned over the evidence to the House, because I think that is something that's an impeachable offense. And Richard Nixon is nothing compared to the 16,000 in the 3 years of the Trump administration. And in fact, the danger to our country from what's happening now is so much greater than what happened in Watergate. I mean, this involves foreign powers. It involves national security. It involves, I don't think anybody ever doubted that Richard Nixon ultimately believed in the rule of law. Everybody doubts that Donald Trump does.
If he even knows what law is.
Yeah, it's whatever. Remember, he thinks that he has the power to do anything he wants, that he is unlimited. And keep in mind that his stonewalling is not just about criminal investigations. Yes, he stonewalled Mueller. Yes, he stonewalled the impeachment. But he's also stonewalling on children in cages. He doesn't let his people come in to testify. How can you have 3 branches of government with oversight if no one will come in to testify? That is a scary thing. That's a fundamental principle of our democracy. And he's getting away with it. That's why we have to stop him. Absolutely, for sure.
Well, you know, the Senate is probably just as bad as he, because they are part of this cult of personality. But, you know, one of the things that, you know, at least I've learned from watching the MSNBC is that if Bolton comes in and testifies, they want to make it classified. Now, what sense does that make?
Well,
to make that classified when he has this $2 million book deal where he's probably, you know, spilled all the beans anyway.
Well, I'm all supporting of authors and selling their books.
Authors getting
I have
$2
a new
million. All
perspective on
right.
this.
Okay.
No, seriously. Obviously, it's all a part of a cover-up, and we have to call it what it is. I actually started at one point trying to get a hashtag called "Say This, Not That," because I think we use words that Donald Trump creates, and we let him set the grammar for the scandal, and we shouldn't. So I think that this is a cover-up, what the Senate is doing. They're having the hearings go till heaven only knows. If you're doing a 12-hour and you're going to take a bathroom break and a dinner break, you're going to be at 3 in the morning. I mean,
yeah.
And they don't have to start at 1 except today and tomorrow. They can start at 9 in the morning, so it doesn't have to go. Now, to some extent, they're hurting themselves because a lot of it is now going to be in prime time that wouldn't be in prime time. So everybody who's at work comes home and starting at 5 or 6 o'clock can start watching these hearings. So if the Democrats are smart, they will time the witnesses and the arguments so that in prime time they're making their best case. And today, even though there were just procedural motions and arguments, they presented a very compelling story. And that goes back to your last question about why only 2 or 3. I actually was arguing for 3 articles of impeachment. It's because you want a narrative. And I don't know if any of you have read the Democrats' brief, but I urge you to. I know it says it's 111 pages, but the first 40 are page turners. It is written in fictional style. Not that's a bad analogy. It's written in readable style. There's no legalese in it. It is really, it tells a story and it repeats it, but not in a repetitious way. It's hard to describe, but I guarantee you, if you start the first page, you're going to want to turn to the second and then the third, and you're going to keep going. I thought I would just skim it, that it's stuff I've already read, and it is. I mean, everybody here knows all of the arguments, but it's done in such a good way that you hope that there will be 1, 2, 4 Republican senators who would at least vote for evidence, and that maybe, as in Watergate, there would be Republicans who actually voted for articles of impeachment, or in this case, for conviction and removal. That's probably me being more Pollyanna than even I am, and I'm pretty much the perpetual optimist, but it is a compelling case. The evidence is there, and they've laid it out very, very well. The president's answer, which is 1 page less, and I thought for sure he'd go for 1 page more, is not at all compelling. It's the same old. I did nothing wrong. I had the perfect phone call. This is not an impeachable offense, even if I did all these things. And so we've heard it. It's argued not so well. I think McConnell, actually, I have to say, did a pretty good job today, better than I would have liked. It didn't persuade me. I know he's lying and it's not true, but it's enough to give cover to the Republicans in the Senate and to keep the 40% who are crazy people sticking with them.
All right, one more question, I'm going to turn it over to our guest here. So one of the things that one of the president's attorneys is his counsel. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was to get him, the House wanted him in to depose him, right? And he's one of those people that Trump wouldn't let come and testify. So how can he be involved in the crime or the cover-up or the misdemeanor and also now prosecute or defend the president against these crimes?
Shouldn't be allowed, but the rules are set by the Senate, and they have the majority, and they're setting the rules in a way that they just don't care about any of this. Obviously, I mean, there are plenty of people to impeach, by the way. Let's look at William Barr.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
He's number one on
Yeah.
my list after well, maybe Pence, I don't know. But I'd say Barr is probably.
Pence and Barr, they're
Pence
both,
and Barr,
yeah.
but Barr probably even before Pence.
I want Nancy as president, so get them both.
Yeah. I had a strategy where we could impeach Pence, then impeach Trump, and Trump, because he thinks he won't get impeached if there's no vice president, because no one will let Nancy become president.
Yeah.
And you know that actually there was no rule for appointing a vice president. It was never, that wasn't part of the original Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
It took the fact that we had the situation where there was no president, and Agnew's resignation led to the first appointment of a vice president, since both president and vice president were corrupt and criminal.
Well, history repeats itself.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Can we get some questions from?
well, actually, would you let our president ask the first question?
Absolutely. Did you?
President Preckwinkle.
President Preckwinkle, yes. Now I'm scared.
So I'm not usually, well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm not usually in the position of, thank you. I'm not usually in the position of quoting the Chicago Tribune, but there was a recent editorial saying that they should censure him rather than impeach him. What's your response to that?
Well, since he's not going to get impeached, obviously impeachment means removal. So I would be all for impeachment and removal because he needs to be removed. He is a constant danger. He will repeat this kind of conduct. Censure doesn't do anything, but if that was a compromise, if there was a chance that we could get Republicans to actually censure him, I think that would be fantastic. He would be the first president censured. They did talk about that with Bill Clinton, and to even talk about Bill Clinton's crimes in the same sentence or even in the same century as we talk about what Donald Trump did. I mean, he lied about a private affair to save his marriage, he says. Who knows why he did it, but who cares? I mean, that's not the same thing as threatening to use the levers of government to help you get reelected. I mean, we're talking about campaign cheating. Right. It's not just, it's also a federal campaign violation. You had the head of the FEC say there is absolutely no question that this is something of value from a foreign country and that is against the laws. So I think censure as a compromise would be a fabulous outcome. I think removal would be the better outcome, but it's not realistic.
All right.
I don't think I've quite framed this all yet, but the Republicans seem to say that the president may have done all these things, but he shouldn't be impeached. I mean, there's nothing there for impeachment. It's okay. And yet, the Democrats are presenting a very lawyerly, in my mind, presentation on what he has done. And I mean, to me, it's we're not even talking, I mean, what we're doing here is apples and oranges all the time with these two parties. And I think we're all left in the lurch here because we're not talking about the same thing.
Well, let's go back to the Clinton impeachment, because there was an argument that what he did was wrong, morally wrong, but that it wasn't an impeachable offense. So this is not a new argument to say it's not an impeachable offense. It's easy to say that a lie about an affair is not an impeachable offense. It is not, it doesn't pass the red face test to say that paying or withholding money to protect a country in a war, hot war with Russia, who is not our friend but is our enemy, is not an impeachable offense. It is clearly an impeachable offense. So that the difference is so great, but the argument does resonate, and so you can't help, if you were a Republican, that's what you would argue. This whole argument is, it's, and you know, he did it, so what? I mean, isn't that what Mulvaney screamed? Get over it. Quid pro quos happen all the time. Yes, they happen in the interests of our country. Of course you compromise. That's how things get done. I don't know how many of you saw, but at Northlight in Skokie had a play called City of Conversation. And it started in the Kennedy administration with a socialite giving a dinner party, Democrats and Republicans sitting at the same table having a very civil conversation, reaching compromise to get something done. And the second act is the Carter administration, where I was very lucky to serve, where there was still some conversation, but it was very different than in the Kennedy administration. And the last act was in the Obama administration, where there is no conversation and nothing gets done. And that's where we are. I mean, the Republicans, and this is partly because of gerrymandering, which is a huge problem that we need to deal with. It's partly because of the difference in media, and that deserves some attention. During Watergate, we had 3 networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, and they all had the same facts. There was no argument about what the truth was. There was an argument about what they meant. You could debate what policies you wanted based on those facts. Now we live in a universe where what I believe to be true is not believed by 40% of the country, or by at least anybody who watches Fox News. And we have alternative facts. If there had been Fox News during Watergate, I think that Nixon would have survived. If there had been a Fox News, I could imagine Rosemary Woods saying that I erased the tapes because they would have exonerated the president. And there would have been a significant number of people who would have believed that. So we're in a deep, bad place where you have voter suppression, gerrymandered districts where you don't need to compromise because you've picked your own constituents, and if you deviate from that, you're not going to get reelected. That's a bad thing. We need to have the kind of compromise that used to be the bulwark of our democracy. So I think we're in a sad state of affairs right now, and listening to these hearings is not giving me any great confidence. I spoke to the 6 Democrats on Sunday, and someone posited that Trump was going to resign, which I believe is impossible. Okay. So that he would resign and that he would then be pardoned by Pence, and then he would run for re-election, and he would have a second term. But you know, there's an even worse alternative, which has been posited, that he might invoke the 25th Amendment and resign for a day, and Pence would pardon him, and then he'd come back the next day. And so we'd only be without him for a day. So just think about that if you want to be horrified at the possibilities in front of us.
We're right here first.
Hi, Jill.
Work your way to the front. Go ahead.
Hi. You know, you kind of led into what I was going to ask. You know me, Jill. I'm always going to go to the dark side. You know, you've got in this room the choir, and that's the blessing. You're speaking to the choir that gets it. How do we, the choir, take this and make the everyday person understand that we're on the verge of a fascism that this country never faced before? When I speak to young people in Inglewood and young people in Edgewater, old people in Edgewater, How do we get them to understand that this is unprecedented? And it's not about party, it's about democracy. And I can encourage everybody when they see you on Chris Hayes and MSNBC, but that doesn't run 24/7, 365. How do you help us talk? And I, like you said, the pages of it were not lawyerly, and you know, I speak as a lawyer, and I also speak as a person that grew up, never left town in Inglewood, Chicago, and I got to be able to interpret to them the importance of them to their life, not just to an election. And that's why I want your books I can bring, because I think we're at a point where we, you know, we as the preachers have got to be able to assemble a broader choir. 60 million people didn't vote. We can't afford that again, and don't get me started on the Electoral College and the destruction of that. But help me, you know, help me understand how I can be you in a way that you have been, and I've seen you do it. You broaden the audience by just making it less complicated, even though it's probably overwhelming, but how do we make it digestible to those who need to save their lives?
You know, if I had done such a good job, he wouldn't be president anymore. I'm depressed all the time that he's still president. I can't believe that there are people. I have tried to engage some Fox people and or Trumpers, and I have to say I have not succeeded once. One person did resign from a board that I was on, partly because, and it wasn't just me who was attacking him, it was, and this was a Pentagon committee, but so mostly military people who were all not for Trump. And it's very hard because they don't accept a factual argument. I can only deal with someone who's willing to accept that something is true. So, or even who could say to me, why do you support him? And they have no basic reason. Oh, because he's made the economy better. For you? How is it helping you? Well, I can't say. I mean, these aren't people who are, you know, Fortune 500 CEOs who are helped by him. So I don't know. I can't believe that the Democrats, who have so many great people in Hollywood and so many great spokespeople, can't come up with a simple thing that says, this is why we're the party that will help you. And we haven't. Donald Trump is a master of communications. For the Mueller report, he got it down to 6 words. No collusion, no obstruction, I'm exonerated. What's the 6 words we had to say why it wasn't true? We didn't. He now says, in answer to everything we say, it just isn't true, I deny it. He doesn't put forward any information, there's not one shred of evidence that rebuts it. The reason he doesn't want witnesses is he has none. Who would he put on who would say things that would help exonerate him? And by the way, I mean, think about this logically. He cannot be exonerated unless all of the evidence is put in and rejected. And they're not putting in the evidence, so he can never be exonerated, period. That's the end of it. He will not be exonerated. And frankly, even a not guilty verdict in a trial does not mean that you're innocent. Right. It means that there wasn't enough evidence. Right. So he's not innocent.
Hi.
Hey.
So my question is, how can we impeach Barr? Because I was watching Rachel last week with Lev Parnas, and he's afraid. And he should be, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, Barr will make your life miserable, put you in jail, do whatever. And that worries me overall. What can we do? What can we do?
He has destroyed the Department of Justice. People are depressed who work there. They see bad leadership, obviously. And there have been complaints filed with bar associations to disbar him, but I don't think that any of those will, you know, proceed. And I think we have to basically focus, you know, in the same way that you only wanted 2 or 3 articles of impeachment because you want to tell a consistent, coherent narrative that people can understand. And Ukraine, for some reason, people understood in a way that they didn't ever understand the Mueller investigation. I don't know why, but it just did. In the same way that you can't, who would have predicted that Harvey Weinstein would start the Me Too movement? Why wasn't it Donald Trump? I don't know why. I don't know what thing will get people to say Donald Trump is too big a danger. And I'm talking about members of the Senate. I'm hoping that they're going to be inundated. When I spoke to the Six Dems, the letter carriers were a big group there. And so I was telling them the story. During Watergate, the Saturday Night Massacre happened on October 20th, and we were inundated with huge canvas bags of mail. There was no email. There were telegrams and telexes. I'm not sure I know the difference, but there were those. But most of the stuff we got came in letters in these huge bags. And it was the public outpouring that 3 days later made Nixon say, okay, I'm going to give you the tapes, and I'm going to appoint a new special prosecutor. And there is no equivalent of that now. Where are the people marching? Why aren't they taking to the streets? At 3 o'clock in the morning, when you're watching your television, you should be out on the street protesting that he's getting away with having those rules. And by the way, contribute to, I think her name is Amy McGrath, who's running against him, right? I mean, let's get rid of him, because if we don't get rid of him and take back the Senate, not just getting rid of him would be good too, but I'd rather take back the Senate. If we could get the Senate back, then we might be able to have some control. So both are really important, and you have to strategically start spending some money to get the message out.
My question is, if Trump survives the impeachment business at the next election, the Democrats do not have a strong leading candidate. So the vote will be divided, and he'll get back in. I find that absolutely terrifying. There is no one single strong Democrat candidate.
Well, I think the answer is clear. First of all, I think there are many good candidates. That's number one. But number two, it isn't, because in the end, we will elect one of them to be the candidate. And if everyone in this room doesn't take a pledge right now to vote blue, no matter who, and on that subject, I think that, and I'll put in a plug for my candidate, who is Joe Biden, and the reason is that I think that this election comes down to a very narrow segment of people who can make a difference. And what we have to do is pick away at the Electoral College, not at, if we get young people who may be very excited, and I just had a talk with some young people who are very excited about actually Sanders and a little bit about Warren, but they're in places like here. We're going to win these places anyway. The places we need to win are the ones that we lost the last time, and that's not going to be Warren or Sanders. It's going to be Biden and Klobuchar. And that, to me, is the dream ticket. So I just think we have to focus on that narrow segment of people we can flip.
Here's a fact. This is a fact, not an alternative fact. And something you should know, and when you're thinking about it, which is the last time more than 40% of white people voted for a Democratic candidate for president was 1960. This is true. This is a real fact. So one of the implications is that the 20% of the black community that did not vote in Detroit, in Wisconsin and Michigan, and in Kentucky is critical. So I think President Preckwinkle will talk, and other people talk later about, once we get through the primaries here and elect Tim Fox, getting out to those 3 states and really focusing on the votes that count. Women and minorities are the only salvation, are the only path to the White House.
I'm not willing to give up on the men. I think that they can be persuaded to vote blue no matter who. I mean, it's people are voting against their self-interest, and it's time that we started voting in our own self-interest.
Jill, thank you. What do you think of the fact that we're going through this impeachment trial when we already know, we've already read the last chapter? Is this a sham? Or is this a good idea because we at least get the ideas before the public who aren't listening?
I think it is a sham, of course, and we do know the outcome, but I think it was the right thing to do, and that sometimes you have to do the moral thing. Otherwise, you're going to be asking, I mean, I lived through the Vietnam War and protested the Vietnam War. I think that there are times when you just have to speak up. I was very involved in the civil rights movement when I was in college, when it was still a big deal. Getting rid of UAC. Anybody remember UAC? Yes. Okay. I mean, I just think sometimes you have to do the right thing. And eventually it is the right thing and it has the right consequences. So I just don't think you can let, and remember, there's an asterisk after his name. Forever he is impeached. Nancy Pelosi is right on that. In the very back.
No, here. Right here.
Oh, okay.
We're moving to the back.
So I used to date someone who said, do you want to be right or do you want to get what you want? And there's no question that we deal with facts. That's right. And there's no question that he lies. That's fact. You know, we could go down the list of things that are facts and that we are right about. You spoke about trying to convince your Fox opposite numbers of another way of looking, and that you failed. And I know of people who are friends, you know, that is, they are relatives of friends, which is probably the more accurate description. I cannot convince them. We're in a period when experts are questioned, expertise is questioned, all the sources that, I mean, there is no Walter Cronkite that everyone trusts, and you could suggest that things like the New York Times and the Washington Post filled that role in another medium, but that's not true. Much of the world doesn't, much of the country doesn't believe them. So how do we win at this? And I'm really not saying that as a troublemaker question, but it's more than being right. How do we get what we want?
Well, first of all, let me say I agree with the idea of getting what you want as opposed to just being right. And I'll tell you a story that's sort of not related to politics, but when I was General Counsel of the Army, there were a lot of issues that I wanted to take on. And as a woman, I didn't want them seen as women's issues, because then they're losers. I was the only woman there. In my book, there is a picture of the Army Policy Council, and it is this huge array of men and this one little person there. And I oftentimes would use a man. I would do all the work, I would give them the arguments, and I would let them be the spokesman, because then it was an HR issue, it was a military issue. And so I think that it's important to figure out how do you get what you want. And sometimes you have to take a little devious route to it. I think we have to be realistic, and that we are not going to get back the people that Donald Trump has unleashed. What we have to do is get the people who sat it out, or who said, it's not Bernie, I'm not voting for Hillary. And that's the people who we need to persuade, because they aren't taken by Trump. And that's why I was saying, in this narrow group that you're looking at, it is those people who were conservative Democrats, liberal Republicans, moral Republicans who are appalled by his behavior. That's who we have to go after, and the independents. That's why I'm saying, let's forget about the people who watch only Fox News. We can't compete with that. They aren't going to see it. And they're not going to see, you know, the rules, by the way, for this trial would allow selective admission of parts of a deposition. So I guarantee you Fox will play whatever the Republicans sponsor, and you'll never hear the other side of it. There was misquoting of Sondland's testimony, which I can't remember, I think Schiff may have pointed out, you know, you said this, but you left out this part of his testimony. So it's very easy to misrepresent and to mislead. And if you're only looking at one news source, and that's something we all have to learn. I mean, we've all learned critical thinking skills, hopefully, but you really do have to pay attention on social media. I never cite someone, I never retweet someone unless I know that it's a verified person, I know who they are, it doesn't mean that the New York Times doesn't make mistakes, the Washington Post makes, I mean, it happens. I made a mistake. I said that 3 of the 4 witnesses, scholars before the House had said it was a crime, and then I realized I was wrong. It was 4. All 4 had said it. So, I mean, mistakes get made, but I think we just have to be careful and we have to repeat the things that are true and verifiable.
Hi, Jill. Thank you for your comments, and I also want to thank CWTA for bringing us together. I think we all needed this. It's food for the soul, and I do plan to join after this. One of the things that I need is, since I mentioned food for the soul, is I think some inspiration. You know, I mean, our country has been through some dark, dark stuff. I mean, this is bad, but this is not the Civil War. This is not slavery. This is not the, you know, the killing of Native American peoples and mass slaughtering and mass, you know, destruction, you know, oftentimes happening all at once in different parts of the country. How do we get beyond this? And you sort of started on that path, but what are the sort of signs? I heard Rachel Maddow talk about, oh, well, the fourth estate is going to be the entity that's going to expose some of this. But how do we get to the next day? We know the sun's going to come out, but how do we get to that next?
Well, you've asked the ultimate question to which, if I had the answer, I'd be running for president, I guess. It's a really it's a really hard question because, yes, the Fourth Estate has a very important role, and my undergraduate degree is journalism. It took me 50 years to actually go into journalism, but I didn't intend to be a lawyer. I intended to be a writer, and I was considered a girl at the time and offered a job on the women's page, and I wanted to do politics or law or something like that. So that's why I went to law school, was to try to get a better job in journalism, and then sort of got distracted. But I still think that in the marketplace of ideas, where you have a free exchange, it works. The problem is we no longer have a free exchange. We have bubbles. And unless we can reach those people, and unless, I mean, I try to read the books that supposedly give you insight into who the Trump supporters are. And a book that never gets mentioned or seldom gets mentioned is Katie Tour's book, which is a very short memoir about her covering the Trump campaign. And it really does expose who those people are and what they're missing in life that they've come to this. And I think it's important to try to understand, even though I fail to, and I fail to be able to communicate with them. They're not listening because they refuse to accept the facts. So until we get back to a fact thing, I don't know what we can do except become the majority that we are. We won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, and yet he's president. And that's why I say we have to focus on the Electoral College votes and chip away in those places. That's where we need to focus. That's what's going to make the difference in whether we become the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And hopefully we can restore some semblance. You know, I went to school at the University of Illinois, and that's Southern territory down there. I would talk to people down there, and they sounded like they came from Alabama or Arkansas, and so now people are saying things that, you know, when I was starting my career, sexism was not illegal, and so people would say things to me that they would never say now because it's totally illegal, but they could say it and mean it. I was told I couldn't have one job, and it happened to be a Senate committee, because everyone else was a male, and they couldn't possibly let me travel with men. And they said it. I mean, it was just, we can't hire you because you're a girl and, you know, everybody else is man. And so somehow we've overcome some of that, but I think deep down, a lot of people still have those same attitudes. They haven't gotten rid of them. They just don't verbalize them because it's illegal. So I think there's a lot that we can do, but I think all the people in this room are thinking the same way. And if you all go out and recruit 5 other people and they recruit 5 other people, and if you go knock on doors in, you know, neighboring territories and, you know, go to Kentucky and help Amy McGrath, you know, go against Mitch. That's what it's going to take, is we just have to be active. I think we've lost that. I mean, in the Vietnam era, people were just protesting all the time and marching all the time, and we don't do that anymore. And there is, you know, the last Women's March had a very low turnout. The weather was terrible, I admit, but I don't think it had, I mean, you barely heard about it in advance anyway. And so we just aren't marching anymore. I don't know why. It just doesn't seem to be the way. So we need other means of communicating and being careful on social media that you're saying the right things and not repeating things that sometimes things sound too good to be true. They probably aren't true.
Right here.
So I think everybody in this room will agree that the Republicans played dirty. And I think that also it's a fact that over 70% of the people want witnesses and they want documents, and clearly the senators are not paying attention to their constituents. So how can we as Democrats use that, even if we have to play a little dirty? Because, I mean, I could see, particularly for Senate, I think it would be really key on those key races, Kentucky, Colorado, Maine. You know, you have them. If they're doing a voice vote, somebody record that, because it would be a great commercial that somebody needs to move forward. And maybe we just need to get a little dirtier than we have been in the past. That's part one. Part two is, what pin do you have on today?
I'm wearing an ostrich because I think the senators are burying their head in the sand. And so that was my message for today, is stop burying your head in the sand. And I think you're right. I don't think tit for tat ever gets us anywhere. You know, an eye for an eye means both people are blind. And so that's not a good thing. Again, I just think even playing fair, you publicize the vote and what it means. And by the way, remember that Mitch McConnell is also controlling the cameras. And he has said they're not going to be allowed to record any of the discussion. So I don't know if he'll let them record the vote. Ultimately, the vote has to be public. I mean, if it's, you know, 53 to 47, you're going to know what the vote was, pretty much. So we can't let Mitch get away with what he's getting away with, because how do we get information to the public? And that's what it all comes down to. Facts matter. Facts change minds. When Nixon, remember, won a landslide, 49 out of 50 states. Yay for Minnesota. Yes. And so he was really popular, and then the facts started coming out. And so whereas support for impeachment was negligible, it suddenly started going like this, and his approval rating went in direct proportion down, because facts were coming out and because all the networks admitted that they were facts. So we have to overcome that, because the people on Fox will never admit that these are facts. So we have to do something about, you know, thank heavens that Bloomberg has said he will use his money if he doesn't win, which I don't think he will, that he will use his money to help whoever it is. And that's, unfortunately, I wish money wasn't the key. One of the reasons Watergate happened is because there was too much money available, unaccounted. There, you know, you could have secret money. The safes in the White House. Rosemary Woods had a safe in her home, overflowing with cash. They had more than if they had had to think about, gee, is it worth breaking into the DNC? What are we going to get out of it? They would have never wasted the money on it if they had, but they had so much money, they couldn't think how to spend it. Let me just tell you, maybe I'll end with something more cheery and funny, is one of the parts of Operation Gemstone was a series of things which included the break-in at the Democratic headquarters. It also included that they were going to put a houseboat or a yacht in front of the Fontainebleau Hotel, which is where the Democrats were staying for that convention, and they were going to lure delegates onto this boat and photograph them in compromising acts. They were going to have call girls on the boat. And that's the kind of thing they were willing to spend campaign dollars on because they had too much of it. And so we don't want to, then all the laws changed. We had the laws, and then the Supreme Court, you know what they did. Citizens United ended all of that, and now we're back to unlimited funding with no accountability and no transparency to who's giving it. And so, that's another thing that we ought to fix. But there are so many things, we ought to fix gerrymandered districts. There's just a lot of stuff we should be doing.
Let's take 2 more questions. Here's one. And who wants to be the last?
A quick comment. I don't think our problem is that we don't fight dirty. I think our problem is in framing. That, when I'm a physician, so I pay a lot of attention to healthcare, and when even Obama started referring to the Affordable Care Act, which was a perfect name, to Obamacare, he immediately eliminated anybody who had a problem with him. We do a terrible job of framing. Another comment, and I do have a question, is I think the Vietnam protests were so explosive because, and I was of draft age at that time, and I wasn't going to go to war. So we had something very deeply personal at stake, just as if there was an economic collapse now, Trump's minions would go away. It would change everything. He happens to be riding the crest of a wave. My question is there a legal basis for holding people like William Barr to account if we take over? We'll have policies to implement, we'll have other business. But I think it's important that people pay a price for what they've done. Trump will not pay a price. Trump is Trump. I grew up in New York. He's exactly the guy he was in the 70s. It's the people around him that are the people that need to pay a price for what they've done. Mitch McConnell, first and foremost, who has stretched the Constitution to a point that is unrecognizable. But then people like William Barr, who I believe somewhere in his exercise of power is breaking laws. So I think that we should, if we get the power of the government, not out of a sense of retribution, but out of a sense of people paying a price for their behavior, we should not just let bygones be bygones and move forward. Yeah.
Well, perjury in front of the Congress might be one of his crimes because he has said things that are clearly not true. Going back to my idea of this hashtag, say this, not that, say ACA, not Obamacare.
Yes.
Because you're right, that is part of letting other people define the message through the words. Let's call things crimes that are crimes. Let's not just call them wrongdoing.
How about lies?
Lies, yes, not just misrepresentations.
So the question is, in the future, if there is a Democratic president with a new attorney general, et cetera, is there any way to bring Barr to account for the misdeeds he's done?
There probably is. I think if we get the reins of power again, we ought to use it to make this a better country and to pass laws that we need.
Okay, we're going to do the last 2 questions
All right,
for who've been waiting patiently over here.
Hi. I'm sure everyone in this room wants nothing more than to see Trump removed during this last term. And I say Trump, I never put the word president in front of his name. But let's say he's not removed and he doesn't win the next election, hopefully. How confident are you that New York will go after him and that he will be prosecuted so that there will be a silver lining to this dark cloud?
I think there's a very good chance that they will. I also believe that there is nothing legitimate about the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that he can't be indicted right now. I thought Richard Nixon could be indicted. I believe he can be indicted. We didn't indict because Leanne Jaworski was adamant that it was the wrong thing to do. And there was an impeachment process in place that actually worked, so maybe it wasn't necessary. But in this case, he's having his cake and eating it too. He's saying, I can't be indicted, and oh, by the way, you can't investigate me for impeachment either. You're not going to get any documents from me. So I think Barr and Trump can be prosecuted for things, but I really think the Democrats need to really focus on getting some accomplished legislation. I mean, they have, I mean, do you hear the list of things that the Democrats have passed? They're stuck because McConnell won't put them up for even a vote, in the same way that he stopped a Supreme Court nominee who should have been approved. I mean, he's got more power and more, I mean, it's really terrible. I just want to say to your question too, I also want to say, I have some handcuff pins that I would really like to wear before the term is over.
Thank you so much for your appearing tonight here. I'm not sure if this is a good wrap-up question, but you had mentioned Mitt Romney and Susan Collins. Is there any opportunity that you see going forward where they can be game changers or will step forward, or do you feel that so far they haven't demonstrated, they haven't gotten outside of their typical, you know, speak out and then pull back box, or is there anything positive that could come about from that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things they could have done that they haven't done. I don't see any clues that they're going to change. It just doesn't seem like they will. I mean, we all were hopeful that Lamar Alexander, that Murkowski, and remember, Murkowski didn't even get the Republican support. She won on a write-in. And if your name's Murkowski and it has to be spelled correctly, that's hard. So unfortunately, I wish I want to end on a more upbeat note than that, but no, I just don't. I think we have to count on ourselves. We have to count on Democrats getting out the vote and motivating people to vote no matter who it is. We can win. We are the majority of the country by an overwhelming number. So let's do it, and if you have children, make them move to Montana.
All right. Before you give that final round of applause to Jill, I want Jill to say 2 sentences about the Watergate girl.
Oh, well, it is focused on what happened during Watergate, but it also is the story of every woman who grew up in my era and what it was like to be in that era. And I don't mention Trump until the epilogue. And so far, the epilogue is still valid. It probably will stay valid. They did let me edit it after it was in print to add Ukraine, or a short, small reference to Ukraine, which presented a problem in the audio, because I read the prologue and the epilogue for the audio version. And it's very hard to say Zelensky's first name. I can say his last name, no problem, but his first name is hard, and so you may hear me saying it more than one way in the... don't ask me to say it now. It's, I mean, thank you, Billy.
So with that, I like 6 o'clock.
It's a fast read, you'll
enjoy. All right, we got another president in the room. President Cullerton, former President Cullerton's in the room. All right, so can I ask our co-sponsors just to come up here, and President Preckwinkle to come up as well, so we can talk a little bit about the future. You know, Jill has given us some ideas, some thoughts, but all right, Indivisible, I see you. I see Jeanette Wilson. Come on, you guys. We gotta get Jill to MSNBC. You on the air tonight? No. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Do I get to come up too? Sure. You can talk about CWTA if you want. I want everybody to say something about their organization. Yeah, I want you right here. Come here. Yeah. All right. Oh, hey there, Jackie. I didn't say you slide in here. All right. So. All right. Some order now. Come on, you guys have been great. So these are the people who are responsible for getting you in the room. These are the co-sponsors of tonight. And Jill gave us some instructions about what we should do. But I'd like to, for each of our co-sponsors and the president here. All right, we're gonna be done soon. All right, but I want. Drinking starts in 5 minutes. But I do want you to hear, because there's no point in us getting upset about what's going on unless we decide to do something about it. President Cullerton, I'm going to put you out unless you let us finish this meeting, okay? We were very orderly until you got here. So can we do that? I mean, you'll give us a few minutes of attention while we finish up, and then you can go eat and drink and have a great old time. So let's start with President Preckwinkle.
Thank you. My favorite member of the delegation, our congressional delegation, is Jan Schakowsky, and she has a button that says, Democrat for President. And I don't want anyone in this room to forget that. Whoever comes out of our nomination process, we all have to be committed to working hard, to doing everything we can to get that person elected. And unfortunately, we came out of the 2016 convention not united, and that had disastrous results for us. So that's critical as far as I'm concerned.
All right, so everybody raise your right hand. Raise your right hand. And we're going to make a pledge. Blue, no matter who. All right? Blue, no matter who. All right. So that's our pledge for tonight.
Hi, how are you?
All right. Who's next up? Lenny, you want to go next? Say who you are.
Hi, my name is Lenny. I'm with Indivisible, Illinois, and Indivisible L9. I'm here with Deb. Deb is with Indivisible Chicago, and thank you all for being here. And also, I just wanted to shout out to Jackie Algie for an amazing Women's March this Saturday, where thousands, tens of thousands of people came out, and Indivisible was one of the coordinating groups with that. I want to implore you to just think on this just for 1 second, to challenge yourselves personally. I know everyone is saying, what are the Democrats doing? But I say to you today, what can you do? What can we do as people, as individuals, and how many people can we bring into this movement? If everybody in this room just brought one more person to be civically engaged in 2020, can you imagine how? And we did it strategically, just like Jill Wine-Banks said, to actually go to the states that need our help, like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Kentucky.
Yeah.
So think on that. Once the primary is over, we need to figure out what each of us are going to do. Thank you for being here.
All right, pass it to Jackie. Oh, Deb. All right, let Deb go, and then Jackie.
Hi. So I'm with Indivisible Chicago Alliance, the sister organization Indivisible Illinois.
Talk into the mic.
Sorry, can you hear me? So we have something for you to do. I hope many of you got a flyer about the True Blue Review, which is on February 3rd. So we're doing a kickoff campaign. We're saying in 2020, it's not just enough to vote. We all have to be organizing. We know everybody has different preferences, different skills, different whatever. We're going to have lots of things you can do. And our project for 2020 is 3 states, 1 mission. So as Jill was saying, it's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois. And so there's a lot of work to be done anywhere. And I will put in a plug, because even in Illinois, where we know will probably be blue, we have to pass the fair tax, people. So there's a lot of organizing to be done. So please come to the Athenaeum's Theater on February 3rd, and you'll be able to sign up for, you know, everything, texting, postcarding, canvassing, phone banking, everything that you want. Indivisible is nothing if doers, if not doers. So come join us, and we'll have plenty of work for everybody to do.
All right, pass it on to Jackie.
Jackie next.
Hello.
Hey.
So, first of all, let me thank, I know I see so many faces in here that were here on Saturday, that marched, that helped to plan it. Yeah, clap for yourselves.
Yeah.
It was an amazing event in spite of the weather. We showed up, we showed out, and people just came in droves and thousands. And what we know is we started the 2020 vision for this year. We want to see clearly what we have to do. We talked about it tonight. There have been some comments about where the focus needs to be. It needs to be in our youth, right? I don't hear you.
All right.
It's our youth and people of color that are going to help us to win this election. They helped us to win it in 2018. They can help us to win it this year. And the states that need to be covered and supported, we've got to get out there and support them and not just talk about it. That's what Saturday was all about, to make a commitment to start making a change. And we can do that starting now.
All right. Sue's next.
Hi. So I'm Sue Gam, and about 7 years ago, Marilyn brought Tina Chen to Chicago when she was still chief of staff for Michelle Obama, and she talked to us about getting active and doing your role and working with your community, etc. Right afterwards, six of us went out for coffee, and we said, what can we do? And this is a strategy that any of you can do with your friends. So we formed a little group and made a listserv of everybody we all knew, and even though a lot of those were the same, a lot of them were different, and we now probably have a listserv of several hundred people. And we have different events from time to time, and we'll send out just very simple, an email with links of things to do to all of our networks. And our next one is writing postcards, February, 15th at Sue Reed's house. So if anybody wants to go, let us know. But this is something that everybody can do with their group of friends and just, spread it out.
Great. Pass it to Mary. And then, Jeanette. Yeah. And
Okay,
then,
so
she's
I'm
gonna finish it.
speaking for Health and Medicine Policy Research Group. Health and Medicine Policy Research Group is an organization that's committed to social justice and equity in health and health care and everything affecting health, which really is just about everything. So you could say that it's an organization that's committed to social justice and equity. We're also proponents of a universal health care, Medicare for all. So that's where we're going in the next election. And we encourage you to look at those health care proposals and think about what you want for yourself, your family, in health care. Thanks.
All right, Operation Push.
Good evening. We're going to do three things. One, we're going to...
All right, order. We're almost done.
I know you're tired.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on registering young voters across the country, but with a specific focus on those states that are in play for the Electoral College. If we can get the youth to understand the voter turnout, we can change the election. Also, I think all of us are going to have to make a greater use of social media. Our generation, as I look around the room, did not have social media. We have to use social media as the President Trump has done successfully with Twitter, pushing messages out in a way that ordinary, uneducated people can understand. So I think that's something we're going to do. The other thing I want to do for CWTA is to increase the presence of people of color, women of color, in the group. And so I'm going to work very hard to help with that.
All right. And last but not least, CWTA.
Hi, my name is Betty Magnus. I am the co-chair of CWTA along with Judith Cossey and my chair, Jackie Grimshaw. We thank all of you for coming. We want to make sure you look on your table, pick up your information, tells you what CWTA does, in addition to what we did tonight, which was coalesce with several groups and bring in the fabulous Jill Winebanks. So Be sure you get a membership card from off your table, fill it out, and be sure and check our website for our next event. Now, all of the people that spoke, I'd like you to run back up here real quick so we can get a photo with Ms. Winebanks.
All right, all of the co-sponsors back up here. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate your coming, and have a great evening.